The crystal glasses clinked as my sister Diana gave her toast, her voice carrying across our parents' elegantly decorated backyard. To Mom and Dad, celebrating 40 wonderful years together. I'm so blessed to be your daughter. I watched her from my seat, noting how her hand trembled slightly despite her practiced smile. She knew I was here, knew what I found, but she was still trying to maintain her perfect facade. My name is Emma Collins, and for 20 years I've carried the weight of a terrible suspicion about my brother Michael's death. Diana, my older sister, had always been the golden child. Beautiful, accomplished, our parents' pride and joy. But Michael had been special. He'd been the one person who saw through Diana's act, who wasn't fooled by her carefully crafted image of perfection. And now I knew why he died that summer night in 2003. The party continued around me as I fingered the worn leather diary in my purse. I found it 3 months ago while clearing out our grandmother's attic, Diana's private journal from the year Michael died. She'd always claimed she was studying at the library that night, that she had no idea Michael had gone swimming in the lake alone. But her diary told a different story. Emma, my mother touched my shoulder, concern in her eyes. You've barely touched your food. Are you feeling all right? I forced a smile. Just lost in memories, Mom. It's an emotional day. Diana caught my eye from across the table, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her wine glass too tightly. She'd seen me talking to various party guests, showing them something in my purse, watching their expressions change. She didn't know it yet, but I was systematically destroying the story she'd maintained for 2 decades. The diary wasn't my only evidence. Over the past 3 months, I'd pieced together everything. The threatening notes Michael had received that summer, the missing life-saving ring from the dock, the mysterious call to his girlfriend just hours before he died. Diana had orchestrated all of it, driven by a jealousy so deep it had turned to hatred. Michael had recently been accepted to Harvard Medical School, earning the praise and attention she always considered rightfully hers. But it was more than that. He'd discovered something about her, something that would have shattered her perfect image. So she'd watched him drown, standing on the dock as he struggled in the water, the life ring she'd removed safely hidden in her car trunk. Time for the anniversary video, my father announced, drawing everyone's attention to the large screen set up in the garden. Diana had prepared it, of course. She handled all family events, maintaining her role as the devoted daughter. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Actually, Dad, I have something to share first. A special memory I recently uncovered. Diana's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the stone patio. Sorry, she said quickly, forcing a laugh. Clumsy me. Emma, maybe we should save any surprises for later. It's Mom and Dad's moment after all. I smiled, meeting her panicked gaze. Oh, but this involves all of us. Especially you, Diana, and Michael. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees despite the warm summer evening. Our parents exchanged glances. Michael's name was rarely mentioned at family gatherings. The pain of his loss was still too raw, even after 20 years. I found something interesting while cleaning out Grandma's attic. I continued, opening my purse. A diary. Your diary, Diana, from the summer of 2003. She stood up so abruptly her chair toppled backward. That's private. You had no right. No right? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Like Michael had no right to live. No right to expose what you'd done. Our mother gasped. Emma, what are you talking about? I pulled out the diary, its pages marked with colored tabs. Why don't we let Diana explain? Or should I read her entry from July 15, 2003, the night our brother died? Diana's carefully maintained composure cracked. You don't understand, she whispered. He was going to ruin everything. The guests fell silent, all eyes moving between us like spectators at a tennis match. 20 years of secrets were about to explode in the perfectly manicured backyard of our childhood home. And I was just getting started. Diana, our father said quietly, what is your sister talking about? I opened the diary to the first marked page, my hands steady despite the gravity of what I was about to reveal. Should I read it, or would you like to tell them yourself? Diana's eyes darted around the yard, counting witnesses. Besides our family, at least 30 of our parents' closest friends were present. Pillars of the community who had watched us grow up, who had consoled our family after Michael's death. This isn't the time or place, she hissed, trying to maintain control. It wasn't the time or place for Michael to die either, I replied, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent garden. But that didn't stop you, did it? I began reading from the diary. July 14, 2003. Michael knows. He found the letters, the proof of what I did. He's threatening to tell everyone. I can't let that happen. Tomorrow night at the lake, it all ends. Our mother swayed slightly, gripping the back of her chair. What letters? What proof? I pulled out a manila envelope. These letters. I found them hidden in a false bottom of the diary. Letters that proved Diana had been stealing money from Grandma's accounts for years. But that wasn't all Michael discovered, was it, Diana? She lunged for the envelope, but I stepped back. He found out about Thomas too, didn't he? The color drained from Diana's face. Thomas had been her professor in college, the married man she'd had an affair with. The man whose wife had mysteriously fallen down a flight of stairs after discovering their relationship. That was an accident, Diana whispered. No one was supposed to get hurt. Like Michael? I asked, my voice sharp. Was he not supposed to get hurt either when you removed the life ring from the dock, when you stood there watching him drown? Our father stood up, his face ashen. What are you saying? I turned to face our parents, my heart breaking for the pain I was about to cause them. Diana didn't just let Michael die. She planned it. The threatening notes he received that week, warning him to keep quiet, I had them analyzed. They match her handwriting. I pulled out more papers from my bag. Forensic reports, witness statements I'd gathered, evidence I'd spent months collecting. The missing life ring that was never found. Check the lake house attic. It's still there, hidden under the floorboards. I found it last week, with Diana's fingerprints preserved under the old paint. Diana's composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand, she screamed. He was going to ruin everything. My reputation, my future, everything I'd worked for. Worked for? I laughed bitterly. You mean everything you'd stolen and lied about? The money you took from Grandma? The affair with Thomas? The accident that nearly killed his wife? Our mother began to cry, quiet, devastating sobs that tore at my heart. But I couldn't stop now. The truth had waited 20 years to be heard. Michael was going to medical school. I continued, my voice breaking slightly. He was going to save lives. Instead, you took his, all to protect your precious reputation. I never meant, Diana started, but I cut her off. Never meant what? To let him drown? Then why did you remove the life ring? Why did you disconnect the dock's emergency phone? Why did you stand there, watching, as our brother died? I turned to the stunned party guests. But here's what Diana didn't know. Michael wasn't just going to expose her secrets. He'd already documented everything. He mailed a letter the day he died, a letter that was returned to sender because he'd written the wrong address. Diana's eyes widened. What letter? The letter that's been sitting in our grandmother's attic for 20 years. The letter I found 3 months ago that started me investigating everything. I pulled out a yellowed envelope. The letter that tells the whole story in Michael's own words. The silence in the garden was absolute as I began to read Michael's final testament, his desperate attempt to expose the truth before it was too late. With each word, Leanna's carefully constructed world crumbled a little more. The aftermath of truth is never clean. As I finished reading Michael's letter, chaos erupted in our parents' once peaceful garden. Diana collapsed into a chair, her perfect facade finally shattered. Our mother's quiet sobs had turned to wails of anguish. Dad just stood there, still as stone, staring at the daughter he thought he knew. I've already given copies of everything to the police, I said into the chaos. They're reopening Michael's case. This isn't just about family secrets anymore, Diana. This is about justice. As if on cue, 2 police officers appeared at the garden gate. Detective Sarah Martinez, who had been helping me build the case for months, stepped forward. Deanna Collins, she said formally, we need you to come with us to answer some questions about the death of Michael Collins. Diana looked wildly around the garden, perhaps searching for an escape route, or maybe just looking for one sympathetic face. She found none. The party guests, our parents' closest friends for decades, looked at her with horror and disgust. You don't understand, she tried one last time. I was protecting our family's reputation. Michael was going to ruin everything with his self-righteous morality. The money I took from Grandma, she never even noticed it was missing. And Thomas's wife, that really was an accident. An accident you helped orchestrate, I said quietly, just like Michael's accident at the lake. The detective stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Miss Collins, please stand up. As they led Diana away, I turned to our parents. Mom had stopped crying, her face now set in a mask of grief and determination. Dad looked aged beyond his years, the weight of this revelation crushing his shoulders. I'm sorry, I said softly. I know this isn't how you wanted to celebrate 40 years of marriage, but Michael deserved the truth to be told. Mom reached for my hand. All these years, she whispered. All these years we blamed ourselves for not being there that night, for letting him swim alone. And she watched him die. There's more, I said gently. The investigation into Grandma's accounts. There's a reason Deanna needed that money. She had been paying blackmail to Thomas's wife. Mrs. Reynolds didn't just fall down those stairs. Diana pushed her, and she remembered everything. Dad finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Why did Mrs. Reynolds come forward? Diana threatened her children, I explained. But I found her last month. She's ready to testify now. Everything's going to come out, Dad. Everything Diana did. The garden slowly emptied as shocked guests made their excuses and left. By sunset, only our immediate family remained. The three of us, sitting among the remnants of what should have been a celebration, trying to process how our family history had been rewritten in a single afternoon. What happens now? Mom asked, staring at her untouched anniversary cake. Diana will face charges, I said, not just for Michael's death, but for the financial fraud, the assault on Mrs. Reynolds, everything. The detective thinks she'll take a plea deal rather than face a public trial. And us? Dad's voice cracked. How do we go on? I reached across the table, taking both their hands. We honor Michael's memory. We tell the truth. We heal. Later that night, after my parents had finally gone to bed, I walked down to the lake. The moon cast silvery reflections on the water where my brother had spent his last moments. I pulled out one final item from my bag. A photo of Michael from his college graduation, smiling broadly at the camera. It's done, I whispered to his image. You can rest now, big brother. The truth is finally out. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Martinez. Diana had broken down during questioning, confessing to everything. The case would be closed properly this time, with the real story on record. As I walked back to the house, I thought about Diana sitting in a cell, her perfect life destroyed by her own actions finally catching up with her. Some might call it revenge, but I prefer to think of it as justice, long-delayed, hard-won justice. The next morning, I helped my parents clean up the remnants of the party. We worked in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. But when we finished, Mom did something she hadn't done in 20 years. She brought out Michael's old photo albums. Tell me about him, she said, her voice stronger now. Tell me everything you remember about your brother. So we sat there, turning pages, sharing stories, letting ourselves remember Michael not as a tragic figure, but as the brilliant, kind, funny person he'd been. For the first time, we could talk about him without the shadow of unspoken questions hanging over us. Diana's trial was brief. She accepted a plea deal, 20 years for manslaughter, with additional charges for fraud and assault running concurrently. Our parents didn't attend the sentencing, but I did. I wanted to see it through to the end. As they led her away, Diana turned to me one last time. Was it worth it? She asked bitterly. Destroying our family like this? I met her gaze steadily. You destroyed our family the night you let Michael die. I just exposed the truth. The difference is, now we can finally rebuild. Today, there's a scholarship in Michael's name at Harvard Medical School. It's funded by the money recovered from Diana's fraud, supporting students who demonstrate the ethical leadership Michael believed in. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about ensuring that truth and justice prevail, no matter how long it takes. It's about transforming tragedy into something meaningful. And sometimes it's about finally being able to say goodbye to a brother who deserves so much better.